welcoming you all to SGMI, Strategic Global Market Intelligence Forum. We are initiating the continuing series with the sole objective with our simple, straight, neutral, practical, in-depth, thought-provoking analysis and projections to prepare both at macro level government with the rules of engagement and at micro level more broader stakeholders including employers, employees, and society at large, to create more viable options on dynamic global trade platform. The customer-centric global options requires not only traditional conventional approach, but critical need of time, CTP, critical thinking process, and systematic thinking, the ability to think outside the box to create possibilities that enhances grassroots trade outcomes. We will be continuously emphasizing in our continuing series the importance of global harmony, peace, understanding, and wider collaboration for global trade benefits to spread and penetrate literally every country on the planet, both developed and developing countries. Our global trade research, analysis, projection, discussion filters out both market and competitive intelligence and prepare all trade entities in advance to prepare and implement effective, viable options in time-sensitive manner that brings the broader positive outcomes. Welcoming you all to our second session of SGMI, Strategic Global Market Intelligence. And in our current session, we will be trying to take the critical topic, tariffs and the world's most revenue generating, lucrative FTA, Free Trade Agreement, USMCA. That stands for United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement. So in the current topic, tariffs and USMCA, not only we will be trying to bring the backdrop, the in-depth analysis, projection, where exactly it stands now, and what we can expect with the current tariff impact, its implication. And again, like from our first topic, the projective analysis also prepares everyone, not only state entities, but also companies, employers, employ, what we can expect at large. So the topic not only includes the tariff and its impact on the world's most lucrative free trade agreement, USMCA, but we will be trying to have a much more broader analysis of the various trade agreement that goes between government. So the understanding of the trade agreement fosters cooperation, harmony, and a broader integration and global peace at large. So if the trade integration that builds on trust and relationship fosters, then on global trade platform, it brings a broader meaning of hope, peace, prosperity, and trying to support, sustain, strengthening each other. So we will be trying to bring the importance, the critical importance of trade for each country. So when we try to get the legality behind the trade agreement, it can be basically between any two states, what we call bilateral agreement, or it can be like the one that we are trying to address, USMCA, between three governments, and that takes the form of trilateral. Or it can be the most prospective one, where there happens to be broader trust, supporting, sustaining each other. That scenario you can try to see in the 26 plus bloc country European Union. But like the way we try to understand the legality of the trade agreement, any two-state, multi-states can sign agreement, but it doesn't mean the trade will go trade-free until unless that trade agreement coming down to the most effective one, what we try to address FTA, free trade agreement. So that free trade agreement, the strength, the essence, happens to be trying to support, complement, and each member state benefiting. And the concept happens to be very clear that the other member state also tries to function on fairness, equality, and it will not be one or the other way, trying to negatively impact what they had agreed upon and that they had signed. So the strength on FTA, free trade agreement, the strength happens to be, in most cases when state signs agreement, the trade is on, but still on the national border, the requirement remains tough and in some cases stiff. And that includes the various type of export-import agreement. There can be duties, surcharges, what we call tariff, non-tariff restrictions. And depending upon how far the trust relationship going. So the trade may be critical, but it comes with all that restriction. So the more restriction, whether we are trying to talk about on documentation, import-export document, or we are trying to address the various type of duties, quotas, and again, it can be classified under the broad categories of tariff, non-tariff. Then what happens on border when we are meeting all those requirements? The simple logic that settles in, more delays. And that more delays means more cargo, logistic, everything becoming expensive. And the final customer, how far they are ready to support, sustain that platform. So just signing an agreement, it may not be enough. But when we are trying to get on a free trade agreement, the one that we are going to address in depth, USMCA, what it tries to create, that the goods moving between the three member states, especially when it was in full implementation from 1994 to 2016, more than 98% goods can easily cross the interstate border without any duties. And not only the documentation brought to the minimum, but also the trust and the sharing of information, and especially electronic manifest and all, makes it sure the delay across the border can be brought to the minimum. And with precision technology and all, we can significantly improve lead time. The lead time where the customer placing the order and the time within which the delivery being done. So the more short, the more confident, the more trust it generates from the customer, and they're ready to experiment more. So the free trade agreement, like 98% that we can try to see with USMCA, but the broader comparison we will be trying to give with European Union. And in European Union, the strength that they have drawn is not only in making their border borderless, integrating their border, and integrating their economy, and integrating under one currency, euro. So we will be trying to broadly bring the various free trade agreement of essence on global platform, but we would like to emphasize countries can sign free trade agreement, but free trade agreement to bring the real effectiveness and efficiency, it need to be regional. So what we are trying to emphasize here, a free trade agreement needs to give everything, like not only the improvement, customer satisfaction very much intact, and at the same time cost to be brought to the minimum, it need to be regional. Like for example, we can try to take the example of BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, looks very good. And the projection by 2050, they will be single-handedly taking 65% global economy. But the challenge here, when you're integrating the block of 5 nations, you try to see very closely, all the nations had been spread out on the planet. So one we have in South America, another happens to be the world's, the one that we are trying to say in South America happens to be South America's biggest economy, Brazil. In Europe, we have the largest country on the planet, Russia. And then we have two countries, India and China in Asia. And then you can try to see the fifth nation happens to be in the southern part of Africa, South Africa. So they can integrate. Of course, we have powerful supplier base here, powerful manufacturing base, and powerful consumer base. But the challenge, since it is not regional, the logistic cost of integrating makes it almost impossible on efficiency. So what we are trying to emphasize for free trade agreement that functions as close to the broader customer, it can be what we call a typical B2C, business to customer, or the broader B2B, business to business, or business to government. It need to be regional. So if you try to see the various free trade agreement, the most effective and efficient one, the one that we are trying to address in our current session, happens to be regional. In short, they are sharing the border. Like US sharing its border, northern border with Canada and southern with Mexico. The same parallel you can try to bring with the European Union. So if you try to see all that 26 bloc nation happens to be regional, so they made their border borderless, trying to become like one integrated region. And the other effective free trade agreement that also we will be trying to bring in our current session happens to be Mercosur, the powerful one that tries to navigate trade in South America. Again, a block of 5 nations, and you can try to see they are all regional. And the other effective one, to a large extent, we will be trying to address a block of 10 powerful Far East Asian countries called ASEAN. And again, the regional strength where that borders are being shared makes it possible if the trust, relationship, and the strong sense prevails that each member state is going to function in a way that is not going to harm others' trade, then you can try to see the regional platform makes the free trade agreement the most effective and efficient one. So in our current session, where we are trying to get the most impacting platform, global tariff, and we are trying to address the current state of USMCA, United States Mexico Canada Agreement, and not only the current state, what we can expect in the coming weeks and months. We will be bringing that projection analysis much more in detail, and what global trade entities, governments, society at large need to be prepared on. In our second session topic, Tariffs and USMCA, we will be showcasing 5 strategic insights. The very first one, the historical backdrop of NAFTA, now renamed USMCA, United States Mexico Canada Agreement. What are the changes from its initiation? What correction, what balancing act? We will be exploring at large. The second insight, we will be showcasing the most powerful global trade agreement, 5 of them, and trying to put in comparison with USMCA, the plus and minuses. The third critical insight that we will be showcasing, Trump revisiting NAFTA. So he has done it first term, 2016 to 2020. That's where NAFTA, with restriction, with quotas, and a lot of restriction, renamed, regrouped, retitled under USMCA. Now it's President Trump's second term ratification that raises a lot of questions. Not only how free the trade will be, because from the start of 2025, you can try to see the broader implication, not only to industry, steel, aluminum, but we are trying to see on broader platform the tariffs spreading out. So we will be trying to address on the second ratification uh, on USMCA, not only the broader tariff, but also the question how much free, how much integrated with the other two nations you was interested in. The fourth critical insight that we will be showcasing with related to tariff and USMCA happens to be the fairness, the equality. So when NAFTA in 1994 came into full implementation, the norm happens to be parallel, that it brings fairness, equality, and mutual prosperity to all the three nations. But what we are trying to witness in the last 5 to 10 years, the balance of payment, when we try to explore in detail of all three nations, the gaps significantly getting wider. And the trade that needs to be on equal fairness that brings mutual prosperity, a big question mark as deficits getting widening, both with the trade with Mexico and Canada, especially for US economy. And the fifth critical insight that becoming much more relevant happens to be USMCA now redrawn on national security. It's not only covering specific industry, but its broader implication and what we can expect in the coming weeks, month, and the trade that it will be reshaping, and it will be redefining the most lucrative free trade agreement on the global platform. The first strategic insight, historical backdrop of NAFTA, came into existence in the late 1980s when a group of 26 European bloc countries came on trade platform, not only integrated the trade on FTA, free trade agreement, but also integrated their border, making it borderless for trade, and at the same time integrating its economy behind one currency, euro. And this posed a serious challenge for United States, not only its global dominance, but also on global trade, the sole international trade currency that brings stability, certainty, US dollar. And 26 bloc country, and it's not like any group of country that joined, happens to be the most developed European nations. The founding member included France, Germany, and Netherlands, and they pulled other European nations on the platform. So the 26 plus European country joining with that integrated economy and with that trade and that strength going behind one currency, euro, showcasing a scenario that can easily replace US dollar as international trade currency. And the concern that the broader commodities on international trade platform will be traded instead of US dollar on euro. And that's the grassroots strength that brought NAFTA into existence, primarily initiated by United States by pulling its northern neighbor Canada and the southern neighbor Mexico on the integrated trade platform. But United States wanted to do it differently with comparison to European Union, where you can try to see they have not only integrated their economy, their trade, their borders, and trying to create a common platform behind one currency also. But US initiation towards NAFTA only for trade. So each country tries to maintain its national border, broader immigration, and every country, the other two countries, will be maintaining its own currency. There is no currency integration. And the platform will be broadly integrated for trade to cross in a way that tries to strengthen and brings mutual trade prosperity to all the member nations. So, brought into full implementation in 1994 and in full play till 2016 when the first broader ratification came into play. So when you try to look into USMCA compared to European Union, the strength, especially the world's number one consumer buying market, United States, makes it powerful. And the strength that they try to draw from Canada uh, with its strong skill-based labor pool, and with Mexico, the efficiency that they can try to draw on the trade and trying to be strong on the global platform, and the dominance continues. The base strength and challenges of NAFTA compared to European Union, uh, on the very base logic, it is not a broader integration, only a trade integration, and US integrating only with two nations compared to European Union, which happens to be 26 plus and sometimes can become chaos. And the challenging end that if you try to say, uh, it is integrated behind one currency, euro. So European Union, no matter whatever the member states trying to trade, since the currency remains consistent, it will not eat out each other's trade. In short, the balance of payment for all the 26 member states because of the consistent currency will remain intact. But that scenario comes into full challenge mode with USMCA. If you try to see closely, it is only a trade agreement, but the broader platform of immigration, national border, and especially the currency, each member state on USMCA maintaining its own identity. And that currency plays a critical part on the balance of payment. Both Canadian dollar and Mexican peso happens to be weak compared to US dollar, and if it is not properly checked, the trade agreement that drawn on equal fairness and mutual prosperity can come into full play. So since the currency is not uniform and the other two currency remains weak, it can easily drain out US economy, and it can really create deficit, and that's what we are trying to see in the last 5 to 10 years. The deficit will be widening, and the strength again not coming from unified currency. President Trump won the first election in 2016, broadly claiming NAFTA had not brought the mutual prosperity compared to the other two nations. And if you try to see the parallel that he had drawn, prior to 1994 NAFTA implementation, United States happens to be the world's number one manufacturing platform. So exactly 20 years, the survey indicated in 2014 that United States not even in the top 50 topmost manufacturing destination. So lot of state suburbs that happens to be very promising on manufacturing, NAFTA, and especially the currency variation that creates deficit happens to be the challenging part, where he had gone for the first time to ratify, bringing restriction, correction, and the earlier name North American Free Trade Agreement he had drawn on USMCA, United States Mexico Canada Agreement, bringing more restriction, documentation, compliance, auditing, quotas, and all. And also, in particular, the way the name coined USMCA, although he initiated the ratification in 2016, but when the ratification completed, it was almost 2020. So that initiation, the trade negotiation that he all had done, continued for more than the time period expected, But the reality that settles in, it was basically Mexico that came in first, and Canada left with no option, signing at the last hour. So the naming USMCA basically tries to indicate Mexico agreed and signed first compared to Canada, and Mexico given that priority USMCA. You can try to say US, Mexico, Canada. But on the emotional note, Canada would like to claim it as CUSMA, Canada US Mexico Agreement. So you can try to see the current state for the last 4 years with its implementation. There happens to be gaps, there happens to be concerns, but if you try to see to a larger platform balance of payment, the deficits widening up. And that is where the much more correction on NAFTA to USMCA, and with the second ratification, it is going to a much more critical impact scenario. The second strategic insight, the powerful global trade agreement in place and the comparison with USMCA. So we would like to showcase 5 of them, starting with BRICS, which we already addressed, a group of nations, 5 nations, globally spread out. Brazil in South America, Russia in Europe, South Africa in the African continent, and of course India and China in Asia. So well projected, if it integrates by 2050, single-handedly can cover 65% of global economy. But there are a lot of challenges before that integration happens, because not only each of these members require US for its trade surplus to happen, but at the same time they can counter each other, like the supplier base, Russia, Brazil and South Africa can be in competition, and the same way the consumer base, China and India, can also come into play. So the second important, and again by trade value happens to be the world's number one, happens to be RCEP. That stands for Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. It basically brings not only China, but also the ASEAN country and 15 Asia Pacific country. So this trade agreement covers almost 30% of the global trade and 30% of the world population. And right now happens to be the world's largest trade agreement in place. But a lot of challenges. Looks good on document, but in implementation, a very big challenge, because RCEP is a strong playing ground of China's global dominance, and the reason that especially countries like India not joining that platform also tries to bring its broader objective coming into full play. And all the nations, again, rather than buying, it happens to be more on sales platform. They are looking for more partners that can buy, try to accept that broader export, compared to USMCA, which happens to be a block of 3 nations, and with US strong sense, it basically complements that platform. The third important trade agreement, of course, European Union. We had addressed already in detail in our current session, a block of 26 nations, and it is a $17 trillion annual trade platform. But again, not only they are integrated with its broader economy, with single currency. So there are a lot of pluses, but especially post-pandemic, it is really creating trade ripples. And the founding countries are finding, especially, uh, the balance of payment coming into full play and the debt strongly spiraling out. That includes Germany, France, Netherlands. And the catch here is, if the trade not balance, it can create divisiveness among its member state. But the relevant fact that settles in, they require US, their most lucrative trading platform. And the next critical free trade agreement on planet happens to be Mercosur, founded by 5 South American states that includes Brazil, Argentina, Uruguay, Paraguay, and Venezuela. Now, Venezuela happens to be under suspension, but again, uh, the 5 nation now it has brought uh, uh, allies, associate allies within South America, but again happens to be a strong supplier base, but they also require Western countries, especially US and European Union, to procure their goods at large. Now, European Union energy and resource drain had fostered a free trade agreement with Mercosur called Mercosur European Union Free Trade Agreement. But again, for the Mercosur bloc, the trade with United States very critical, and especially its number one economy, Brazil, under economic stress with 50% tariff. And the last powerful trade agreement on global platform, we would like to address ASEAN, also known as Asian Tigers, a group of 10 plus Far East Asian nation. But the historical backdrop in the 1990s, currency devaluation, and the broader trade very much requires US as a powerful trade platform. And the current tariff ranging from anywhere between 15 to 25%, again trying to bring this trade agreement and its full implementation into full play. So what we would like to bring out, USMCA in comparison with powerful global trade agreement, it single-handedly happens to be the most lucrative, most revenue generating, and again, the reason happens to be the world's number one consumer base, United States, and covering 31% of the global trade. And with the current tariff that happens to be in full implementation, other free trade agreement, its effectiveness and efficiency happens to be in full check mode. The third strategic insight, Trump revisiting NAFTA. The backdrop, equality, fairness. In 1994, its implementation had brought widening trade deficits. And like the way we had already indicated, President Trump's first term election drawn on the same, and the wider deficit, and United States losing the world's number one manufacturing platform. So the first ratification that came from 2016 to 2020 are not only NAFTA changing its title to USMCA, so that North America Free Trade Agreement, that free trade had kind of diluted out. And although the 3 nations still integrated on trade platform, but it had brought more restriction, more documentation, compliance, audit, and also in some case restrictions with quota. And one of the most interesting clause that had been added to the USMCA happens to be the sunset clause. So when NAFTA came into full implementation, it was not having the sunset clause, means the expiry. Now in 2020, when all the 3 member states agreed every 5 years, the sunset clause requires that the member state will be having a thought process that the mutual prosperity very much into play. So the next ratification of that 5 year time period happens to be in July 2026. So also interesting on the USMCA happens to be 34.6 article that allows any of the three member state to withdraw from the USMCA agreement with or without clause. So the member state not only to just wait for the ratification that's happening every 5 year, but they can try to uh, leave the platform if they try to see the mutual prosperity not very much there. So that scenario not very much happening from Canada or Mexico, but the bigger trade platform, US, wants to make it sure that if it is trying to draw like the way we are trying to address wider trade deficit, then it requires a serious balancing correction and check. The fourth strategic insight, USMCA, United States Mexico Canada Agreement, not a free trade agreement on fairness and equality, with the trade deficit widening, especially US trade with Canada and Mexico. And the core reality behind that trade deficit happens to be, compared to European Union, currency not uniform. So both Canadian dollar and Mexican peso remains weak. And if it is not corrected, it can very easily create wider trade deficit the way we are witnessing. And some of the industry that happens to be strategic core even to United States, like steel, aluminum, automobile industry, you can try to see a fair share because of the lower currency value, both on Canadian and Mexican end, can really challenge the free trade agreement on fairness equality. So the current tariff, where it is trying to identify some industry as universal core, including steel, aluminum, copper, 50% tariff globally. And each respective state on reciprocal tariff will be drawn on a tariff bracket. So USMCA, that happens to be an integrated free trade agreement with the three nations, the free trade not very much going to happen. So there will be some level of tariff. Some industry will be consistent with the universal core 50%, and the remaining how free the trade happens to be. And again, the concern from United States, the widening trade deficit, and how the way the two member nation can be a complementary partner to not only reduce the deficit, but the mutual economic prosperity in the region can be brought at large, happens to be a big challenge. The final and the fifth strategic insight that happens to be the most critical, relevant, where trade entities and nations needs to be prepared. USMCA now drawn on national security. So the redrawing of USMCA on national security on Section 232 of the 1962 US Trade Expansion Act, primarily covering steel, aluminum, copper, and very recently auto parts also included. So the one that is getting on national security, not only the lower appeal court trying to support sustain, but it is trying to draw universally a kind of a consistent 50% tariff. And for both Canada and Mexico, all this industry happens to be very, very strategic, and especially for their balance of payment. So the catch here is, if national security comes into full play, it can bring a kind of divisiveness both with Canada and Mexico, and the lucrative free trade agreement, the way it was brought in 1994 in full implementation mode, and in 2020 ratified for the first time, but when it is going for the second ratification, the USMCA on national security can really create the divisiveness that can very well bring the clarity. It is not a free trade agreement at large. But what United States trying to look with its two complementary member partner, Canada and Mexico, that they need to complement, and that complementary role that they need to play is the puzzle where US carrying the world's leading debt and also the deficit. How the way the trade with that nations, both Canada and Mexico, can support, strengthen, and the mutual economic prosperity. Not only the trade that is bringing with the three nations, but in North America can very well persist, happens to be a big play. So the national security trying to cover core industry can really bring the free trade agreement USMCA, especially on the second ratification note, onto a strong question that it will still remain a free trade agreement, or it will be an agreement but tariff, especially on national security, will be bringing its implementation and of course effectiveness, efficiency completely challenged. On topic tariff and USMCA conclusion, we would like to suggest all the three member nations needs to come down on a collaborative platform and not only trying to understand the historical backdrop that brought the strength, effectiveness, efficiency in that trade, but the broader prospect of fairness, equality, and mutual economic prosperity, where each member state trying to get kind of strength. And it is not like when the trade deficit widening up, how the way we can try to do that balancing act, and how the way we can be a complementary partner, and especially to United States, which happens to be the world's #1 buying market. And it can try to draw partners literally from any regions of the world. So the regional strength that Canada and Mexico bringing very powerful, but the trade deficit needs to be strongly corrected, checked. So the onus for USMCA to progress happens to be with the two members, Canada and Mexico, how the way they can fit into the concern puzzle for United States, where national debt significantly spiraling out of control, and at the same time the deficit that's widening, especially with Canada and Mexico, also tries to bring a challenge. So some of the industry that had been initiated in United States, now it is becoming a parallel threat platform from both Canada and Mexico, whether we are trying to address steel, aluminum, or automobile sector. The in-depth analysis and projection thought-provoking platform, SGMI, Strategic Global Market Intelligence, initiated to create proactive awareness and sound preparedness in global trade implementation and practices. We appreciate your qualitative time to visit us to gain global know-how, and we equally count on your inputs, suggestions, feedback towards continuously improving our strategic communication platform. Thanks.